Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short, soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, author of Writing That Gets Noticed. And today I'm so excited to have Robyn Silverman, PhD, with us today. She has written How to Talk to Kids About Anything. What I'm really excited that Robyn did is she wrote a book that has parents understand how they should talk to their kids about anything using scripts and all sorts of examples. So I want to just tell you a little bit about Robyn. She is known as the Conversation Doc. Dr. Robyn Silverman is a child and teen development specialist and author of How to Talk to Kids About Anything, as well as the host of the popular podcast of the same name. She is the co-founder of the Powerful Words Character System, which gives educators the talking points they need to help children become kind, responsible citizens of the world. Dr. Robyn has appeared on the Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Early Show, and Nightline, and has been quoted in the New York Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, CNN.com, and many other publications. She lives with her husband, 2 kids, and fuzzy rescue dog who loves sunning himself on their front steps, even in the summer heat of North Carolina. Find out all about the book at drrobynsilverman.com, and I'll put everything in the show notes. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. And while you were listing the things I was doing, I was like, you actually have quoted me in a lot of those publications. So thank you.
Exactly. And I think the most recent was one maybe for Good Housekeeping on toxic teens. That was so much fun. And I remember when I interviewed you, because I interview so many parenting experts, and I used to primarily be a parenting writer, which I've now pivoted as my daughter's a teen. Really, what I was so impressed with is that you structured everything that you told me in a very reader-friendly way. And that's my background from traditional media, and in my book, I talk about at your reader service, like how to structure things. And your book is set up in this very specific and easy to follow and reader-friendly way. So I want to get back to that in a minute, but I want to ask you, I know that you have the podcast. What is the genesis of the book?
So the book is really 40 years in the making, because when I was in 5th grade, I was bullied. I was ostracized from my entire class. And when I was kicking stones on the blacktop and all the kids were up on the hill, kind of pointing and whispering and laughing, the aides who were watching just didn't say anything. They didn't approach. I don't know if they didn't know what to say, or they didn't feel like it was their place to say anything. Inside the building wasn't much better. The teachers didn't know what to do or say. And my teacher actually tried. She called a meeting of the entire class and actually had me go to the library by myself and then talk to the class about the problem, which was me. And then called me back. She actually sent one of the worst offenders to come and get me, the person who called me her very best friend, but only on the weekends. During the week, I didn't exist, or was worse. It could be to feel like she really didn't care or she didn't like me. And then I went into the classroom, and I remember the teacher being like, so what do you want to say? And I'm like, no, what do I want to say? What? I'm sitting there wide-eyed. There's not a kid who can feel more alone than a child who's being watched by 20 pairs of eyes, waiting for them to mess up, fail, or say something that's going to make them feel stupid. And, at home, my poor mother would just hand me tissue after tissue and I would be sobbing. She wouldn't know what to do or say. I'm sure she, just wanted to be like, don't be friends with these people. And there's other people. But I think I needed to hear these aren't your real friends, which is what I cover in, my chapter on friendship and bullying, amongst other things. I need to hear that I was worth something and enough. And, that's what I do in my self-esteem and body image chapter. I needed to, know that my mistakes and failures didn't define me. And I do that in my failure and mistakes chapter. And so all of these things are kind of weaved into the book, and a tribute to those kids who haven't had parents or educators or aides who knew what to say, even though they may have cared so much, didn't know what to do or say, didn't have a template of how to begin. So that's where the book comes in.
I love that. And as somebody who was bullied myself, I totally appreciate what you're saying. I had a great guidance counselor who really knew how to handle the situation and give me the role playing
That's wonderful.
that I was later able to help my daughter with, which I wrote in my piece for the New York Times, How to Bully Proof Your Child. So yes, this is so great that you are breaking it down, because parents are looking for that guidance. Now, there are so many parenting books out there, right? There are a ton of parenting books. What do you feel like when you were writing this one was the differential factor that you really wanted to do to kind of stand out from the pack?
Well, I feel like parents and educators and coaches have told me that they have read parenting books and have gotten a little nuggets of information, but they really wanted to know what to say in these tough situations, in these challenging topics. And often they would come away from parenting books feeling like they knew more, but they didn't know how to do more. So what do they need to actually say in the moment when the child says, but how does the baby get in there? Or are you going to die? Or what, am I a failure if I'm keep failing? What's wrong with me? What, am I allowed to be sad in this situation? Am I allowed to play when somebody dies? All the things that they may be thinking along the way about friendship or family or divorce or the tough topics. Kids want to know these answers. Parents do want to know what to say. And sometimes they would actually say to me, and educators too, like, can you just come to my house or come to my classroom and do it for me? And we would laugh, because of course it's best coming from the trusted source, the actual parent or the actual educator in the situation. But I get the point, because it is nerve-wracking to start these tough conversations and continue them, and knowing that they're not just one-offs. It's never just one conversation, but a series of little ones along the way of childhood into teens and into adulthood.
Yeah, it really leads into it. Like, I love you give so many great tips. So you say, including yelling works. Now, and I agree completely. I mean, I know there are parenting books out there and they say, never yell at your kids, never punish your kids. I'm like, really? I gave my daughter a timeout when she was little. It worked. Yelling occasionally. And you preface it by saying not all the time, but there are times when yelling will work.
Right.
Talk to me about some of these tropes that are, that we've been told. And actually, I think it hurts mothers, it hurts parents to be told that you should be a perfect angel with your child. The other day, my daughter, actually last night, she came into my room, and she's a great kid. I'm going to preface it by saying that, but she said, I need you to help me with my homework, with my Mandarin homework. And I said, excuse me, am I an amorphous blob that just sits here statically waiting to be activated by your every need? And she was like, huh? I said, excuse me, am I just sitting here? Oh, I am ready to serve. And she said, no. I said, so how would you then approach somebody who's doing editing work for somebody she's coaching, or maybe writing a piece that's due tomorrow? She said, Mom, are you busy right now? Can you help me? I will put this aside and I'll help you. So it's I'm not a perfect angel. She's
Mhm.
not a perfect angel. It's this acceptance. And I find in your book, there's a lot of this acceptance. So
Mhm.
talk to me more about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you hit the nail on the head there that we're not perfect. And in fact, Wendy Young said to me on my podcast, and she does like dealing with kids who are angry and how to help them cope and all of those things and tantrums. And she's like, what better way to show your child that they can be human than to demonstrate that you are also a human being? That's so important. And a friend of mine said to me, you matter in equal measure. I love that. And I hold on to that. So when you were saying, am I just an amorphous blob sitting here? No, you matter in equal measure. You have things you're doing that are important to you. You have needs and wants. And you also want somebody to demonstrate that they recognize that. You want your child to understand that they also should be recognized for what they're doing. So you're demonstrating that. When I said yelling works, it means that you never want to be reliant on that type of emergency brake system that I call it, where your child is running into traffic and then you yell and you show them that this is a big deal and it's worth yelling because you need their attention right then and there. Should you do that all the time? Of course not. You don't want to be riding the emergency brake all the time, just like you wouldn't do in a car, because that will wear it down and it won't work anymore. So, yes, every once in a while, that is a necessary strategy to use to get your child's attention in a situation that may be unsafe. And there are other strategies that you don't want to be doing all the time, but that you show your child, I am human. This is where I begin and end. This is a really big deal to me. And this is not such a big deal to me. And so I'm going to approach it differently. Yeah, you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. Like I make mistakes. And I'm really calm about this. This one where you hurt somebody and you really like you lashed out, you hurt somebody, this is a huge deal to me. So I'm going to approach it in a different way. I'm going to show you that I'm much more serious. And I'm going to now take this car that you just bonked your sister on the head with. I'm going to put it away for right now. And I'm going to talk to you about how we approach things when we're angry once you're calm, not while you're in the middle of it, because that's absurd. And then we're going to get the car back and try again when we're calm and ready to take on that responsibility. But yeah, you spilled some milk. This is not a big deal to me. Am I going to, make a thing about it and take away the milk? No, I'm going to have you try again. So different approaches, different times, and always keeping that dialogue open, connecting through conversation is very important.
And I think you're making an important point here, different approaches for different times. There are some perennial parenting books that are maybe from 3 decades ago. That's not going to fly these days, people. Like, get the latest and the greatest.
Thank you.
You're addressing some tough topics also. Talk to me about your decision to address some of the tougher topics, not just like self-esteem and body image, but sex, death. I mean, especially in today's fraught world. Talk about that.
These topics need to be discussed. And one of the things that I really make sure to deliver in my book is to say that kids want to talk about these topics with their parents. You are the trusted source. They don't want to get it from somewhere else that may be a mistrusted source, but sometimes they feel like they have to, because if they don't get it from you, where are they going to get it from? They still want the information. So we know that kids who get the information from their parents, talk about these tough topics with their parents, are much less likely to engage in risky behavior than those who do not engage in these topics with their parents. So parents often say to me, oh, if I bring up sex, they'll think that they should do it, or like I'm giving them permission. It actually doesn't work that way. Or if I talk about suicide, a very troubling topic, but we need to, that they may get the idea to do it. That actually is not how it works. The research tells us again and again that when parents talk about these very difficult things, kids are getting the information that they need to make good choices for themselves and are much less likely to engage in that type of risky behavior. So we need to get talking about it. Where do you want them to get the information? From you or the kid in the back of the bus or some kind of TikToker that doesn't know your child, doesn't know their sensitivities, and may not have their best interest in mind?
That's so important to point out because kids are getting a lot of their information from TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
more than you really
Mm-hmm.
imagine,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one of these 24/7 things. It's sort of like when Nintendo came out back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what TikTok is. And I've gone down the rabbit hole too of TikTok, but maybe more with animal fun stuff.
Yes, yes, yes. A whole different thing. But like, over time, if a child or a teen has been looking at TikTok and they feel like they know these people and they visit every single day and they're following their videos, then their information may become more trusted in their minds, even if it's not accurate. And even if it doesn't uphold your personal values. Now, given that your values may be different than your child's, you still want to talk to them about, here's where I'm coming from. This is what I think about sex or one of the drugs or alcohol, where people might have opposing views. But you still want to keep things open to ask them what their view is. And you won't get that if you don't talk about it.
Yeah. And you did a lot of research for this book. I mean, you have
so much
pages of notes at the end, which I love. I had a ton of them for my book too. Talk to me a little bit how you did the research. I mean, you talked about, praising the effort, which I think is something that came from the book Grit. And, you talk about, I think you cite that author. You have a lot of research in here. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So in 2017, I started my podcast, How to Talk to Kids About Anything. And I started it for two reasons. One, I wanted to start a podcast that I thought would really help parents and educators and coaches who wanted to better talk to kids about all different tough topics. But it was also a very public way for me to get my interviews for this book. So a lot of those interviews, it kind of did a double time. That a lot of those interviews appear in my book. I interviewed these best-selling authors and top experts on how to talk to kids about all kinds of tough topics. I present a complete child development pie, and each one of those best-selling authors and experts provided the deep slice. So I might interview somebody on suicide or on death or on talking to kids about puberty or sex or failure or divorce or whatever. And many of them appeared in my book in some way or another. I also wanted to make sure while I was writing, like if I was writing about one of these tough topics, I don't want to just do words that somebody said or I said. I wanted the research that actually said, this is the truth. And I would stop and I'd say, I really need more of a statistic here. I want to know what the science is here. And so I would research many different articles to support my hypothesis, just like I would have done in my, by school for my PhD that I did at Tufts. And that really came in handy. The marriage and sort of the writing that you concentrate so much on is, how do you present the science and the interviews in a way that's helpful for parents, that doesn't dumb it down, but doesn't sit there and do like all this jargon and talking about theory and things that aren't not that helpful to somebody who's like, please just give me the information I need. I'd like to talk to my child about sex, or how babies are made, or whatever, masturbation, things that are really tough to talk about, but I would like to be able to do it. So how do you package that in a way that's accessible and usable for the parent and for the educator, and do it in a way that's fun and kind of like how you'd want your knowledgeable best friend who studies this stuff to talk to you about it?
That's exactly how it comes across.
Thank you. That's a really big deal to me.
I've interviewed so many parenting experts, and I would say in terms of packaging information and providing the sound bites in a way that I, as a journalist, was able to use, it's like you Lisa D'Amour,
Mhm.
Michelle Borba,
Mhm.
been on the podcast, are some of the top who
Thank you.
have that. So
They blurbed my book, and they also said really lovely things about my book for that same reason. I think we come from that similar perspective that it's not helpful to sit there and pontificate about the science when you can't translate the science into something usable in your household.
it's not using that academic writing, which I say,
Yes.
I'm on a lot of groups and a lot of people say, I am a therapist, I am a
Mhm.
doctor, and I am writing. And they start saying what they're writing about. And I think, holy
You're
cow,
like, what is this?
who is going to read this? It's
Yes.
all high level. And I
Mhm.
talk about that in my book a little bit, like high level academic
Mhm.
language that doesn't translate. It does not compute
Mhm.
to the average person, who, by the way, the average person has the reading level of a sixth grader in
Mhm.
the United States. That's in studies. I think the Pew Center said something about that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean, that's still a high level of reading on certain levels,
Mhm.
but does not include this very pedantic, passive
Yeah.
voice. So what are some of your actionable writing tips in actually writing these
Mhm.
books or writing something?
Well, I'll say to your point, like there are studies that I read that I'm like, what are you even saying? I don't understand why we have in journals a way of writing that alienates the reader so much. And even as somebody who is science minded, it's silliness. Nobody speaks like that. So one of my tips is say your stuff out loud. If you're talking to yourself and you're like, what is this, like, would I ever say this to another human in this way? If they were like, hey, Dr. Robyn, or Mike, like a friend in my neighborhood, like, hey, I'm having this problem with my daughter, she said this, am I going to like talk all the way up here about like the science in this way? No, I'm going to say something like, I found this really interesting study and it told me that you have to be with a friend for 200 hours before they become your best friend. Like, that's interesting, right? Like, that's like something that wow, 200 hours. I know. Isn't that amazing? So when you're telling me your daughter's feeling like she's not getting to know people that well, she just moved here. She's only been here for like 2 weeks, but she feels like she doesn't know them that well. Like, let's go back. Like, how many hours is she really spending with these people so far? And maybe one of the best ways of going about it, just from listening to what you're saying, Mom, is that maybe she needs to ask somebody for some time to hang out outside of school for a couple of hours. And tell her that statistic. That's really freaking interesting, because then she can go, oh, I probably only spent 50 hours with this person, which actually only equates to like maybe like a friend or an acquaintance. Oh, okay. That's when the science really works. Like, I've told my own son things like that. These are really important. Or my daughter, I sat down, you probably read this part, because Melinda Wenner Moyer said to me when she was interviewing me, she was like, so there's this part where you're talking about porn. Can you explain that story? Sometimes you just have to rip off the Band-Aid. So I just was like, sat down with my kids and was like, hey, I read this study that said the majority of kids by the age of 11 seen porn. Have you? So these are real, like, how can you take things and make them usable and conversational? That's one of my tips for writing. I also speak out loud when I'm writing scripts. This is not very helpful if you're speaking all the way up here and you're telling parents, like, I want you to talk about, this very up thing. You're like, oh, according to Carol Dweck, we're got a growth mindset and you need to have a growth. No, you need to talk like, your child is going to understand that when we make mistakes, it makes our brain grow. Okay, well, that's much more usable. And and use stories. Did you know that your favorite baseball players that have like a 333 average, you're speaking with the child because the child actually understands what you're talking about now, actually messed up 2 out of 3 times they go to bat. Okay, so each time that you try this soccer goal and you miss a bunch, That's pretty normal. And in fact, even the best athletes have that. So how can you use your writing to make a friend with the people who are reading it? What are they interested in? What works for them? Like if you're talking to a child, did you know Dr. Seuss, had to submit his book 27 times before somebody said, oh, that's a book that I want to publish, because it's on the level, but also of the interest of the other person. What are they thinking? How can you translate your information in a way that they can receive it and use it?
I love it. This is such great information and great advice. So what is next for you?
My husband's probably like, that's right. I mean, it was all encompassing. You're a writer, so maybe your process is extremely different than mine. Mine, each time that I wanted to write a new chapter, it was like writing a new book, because you're like, all right, I'm now done writing about death. Now I'm writing about divorce and family. And now I have to do a whole new research project. It's like starting from scratch. And there were moments when I would just stand there, probably every chapter, in the middle of my living room and like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Have I gone bananas? And my husband's like, should I play this from the last time? I think I recorded it. You did the same thing. So there are chapters that did not get into this book. So I'm like, what am I going to do with them? I don't know. Is there another book or is there something else? This one became a national bestseller. So that feels really good. But I think right now, I'm excited about traveling around and seeing the people who have read my book. I've been doing book tours and speaking engagements and booking things all the way into next year. And just getting to know the people, hearing how they're using my book, that's exciting. I don't want to be the person who I used to be, which would just be like, let's check that off and go, move on. Let's stay here for a little while. Let's, soak in what people are getting from the book and hear from the people who are reading it and get to know them, shake their hand, sign their book, speak to their audiences, and just enjoy that part.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being a guest on the program today. It was really wonderful to have you. Dr. Robyn Silverman, How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Thank you. And everybody, so much more on Freelance Writing Direct. Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.